Welcome back to Stories Aloud, where every story carries a shadow you can't quite shake. Today, we step into The Safekeep by Yael Wouden, a haunting novel about desire, loneliness, and the kind of secrets that cling to a house long after the people are gone. This is a world of locked rooms, fading memories, and a woman slowly swallowed by a past that was never hers. Welcome. We are about to explore this really extraordinary book. It sets up this tightly controlled universe, just a single house in the Netherlands, 1961, and then it just sets it on fire when these two women collide.
It absolutely does.
And for those of you who read it, you know the conflict here it's not just some simple love triangle or a domestic fight. It's about something much deeper. It's about displacement, about moral debt, and what it really means to belong somewhere that maybe legally is yours, but morally belongs to someone else.
And that's our mission today, really. To
Right.
pull apart that complex structure. We want to get beyond just a plot summary
Yeah.
and get into what it all means. We're looking at Isabel, the isolated resident whose whole life is basically an act of denying history.
Right.
And then Eva, the guest who shows up unwelcome, and her very presence is a demand for that history to be reckoned with. We're going to chart how they go from, suspicion and paranoia to this terrifying, twisted kind of intimacy.
An intimacy that all leads up to this brutal revelation about where the house came from and the trauma it's built on.
Exactly.
We'll be focusing a lot on this question of possession. Isabel tries to possess the house with rigidity, with cleaning, with maintenance.
While Eva seeks to possess it through, let's call it moral reclamation.
And then, and this is the really terrifying part, they try to possess each other. So what we want to give you today are those key insights, those moments that make you go, aha, the things that connect the personal tragedy of these two women to the much, much larger story of post-war identity in the Netherlands.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's start with Isabel, because her identity isn't just in the house, it really is the house. The book shows us this woman, she's approaching 30, and her entire existence is just maintaining this absolute frozen-in-time order. It's almost like she thinks if she stops dusting for a second, the whole world will just crumble.
That's the perfect way to put it. Control is survival for her. She's been in this house since 1946, since she was a girl. And her mother, before she died, she's the one who set up this rigid system of safekeeping.
So Isabel inherited the job.
She inherited the duty, yeah.
Yeah.
She feels responsible for keeping it perfect for her brothers and her uncle, who are all distant figures. Her job isn't living there. It's preserving a perfect, static memory of her mother's world. Her personality isn't about her own desires. It's a kind of managerial devotion to a building. She's trying to make the house immune to time, immune to history.
And the symbol of this almost desperate control has to be the china set, the one with the three hairs.
Oh, absolutely. The symbolism of that china is so critical, and it's a thread we had to keep pulling on because it runs through the whole novel. It's her mother's favorite set, and it's kept in a glass vitrine in the dining room, locked away.
Never used.
Never used, never touched. Isabel's rule is crystal clear. They are not for touching, they are for keeping. And that right there, that tells you everything about her philosophy. She's trying to freeze time, to control memory, to create a feeling of security that is, in reality, incredibly fragile.
She's defending this perfect, static version of the past where her family is safe and they belong. But, the interesting thing about the image itself, the three hairs, is that it suggests an impossibility, right? They're chasing each other in a circle. They're always moving, but they never get anywhere. They never catch each other.
Exactly. You've hit on the central irony. Isabel is using this glass case to stop the movement, to enforce stasis on an image that is all about eternal, unfulfilled motion, desire without fulfillment, and impossible possession.
And that's her life.
It is. She is constantly in motion cleaning, checking on the maid Nielke, supervising, but she's stuck. She's emotionally and physically trapped in the same spot, chasing this sense of true belonging that the house, given where it came from, can never actually give her. Her constant work is just a desperate attempt to catch that feeling of ownership.
That her perfectly frozen world gets punctured. And it's by the smallest, most violent little thing. A broken piece of ceramic. The house literally starts coughing up the evidence it's been holding.
This is the seed of doubt. The very beginning of the end for her controlled world. She finds it in the garden, buried under the roots of a dead gourd, and it nicks her glove, a tiny bit of violence from the earth itself.
So she checks the vitrine.
She checks the vitrine, and the set looks complete. But the shard is undeniable. It's part of the hair pattern. And it's the very first piece of physical proof that her mother's perfect control might have been a lie, or at least it wasn't perfect. This tiny piece suggests that some kind of violence, some kind of denial happened long before she took over, and that the house itself is hiding trauma just under the surface.
And that immediately sends her into the spiral of paranoia about the house's history. A paranoia that gets a huge push from her brother Hendrik.
A completely casual comment from him, too, which makes it so much more devastating. This is a huge turning point because it shifts the problem from, maybe a broken plate, some domestic carelessness, to something much bigger, historical displacement.
So what does he say?
Well, they're meeting in Den Haag, and he just casually says, maybe the plate was broken before we even moved in, and then he just drops this bomb. He says the Den Brave family, their family, didn't bring any of the furniture. The house came finished. Everything was already there. The crockery, the chairs, all of it.
Wait, so Isabel, who has spent 20 years obsessing over her mother's precious, unique taste, suddenly has to face the fact that everything she's built her identity on, the china, the vases, the entire aesthetic, it all belonged to strangers.
She was only 11 when they moved in. She just adopted the life that was already there, laid out for her.
Her whole sense of heritage is just gone in an instant. The house isn't a memorial to her mother, it's a filled vessel they just walked into. The implication is staggering. Their story didn't start there, they interrupted someone else's.
And this just pours fuel on the fire of her pre-existing fear of being dispossessed. Her paranoia suddenly feels completely justified.
Right, because that's the engine driving her, isn't it? The house isn't really hers to begin with, not securely.
Not at all. It's a conditional space. Her uncle Carol promised the house to her brother Louis, should he ever want it for a family of his own. Isabel knows deep down that her entire existence, her security, it all hinges on Louis not wanting it.
So this structural precarity, this constant threat, is what makes her obsession with keeping the house in order a matter of, emotional life and death.
Totally. She's terrified that any flaw, any little crack, any sign of disorder will be the excuse they use to evict her.
So you have these layers of motivation for Isabel. She's trying to freeze time to keep Louis away, and at the same time, she's trying to whitewash a history she's just starting to suspect exists. But this whole defense mechanism is about to fail spectacularly when chaos arrives.
Chaos in the form of Eva.
Chaos in the form of Eva.
So Louis is off to Brighton, and he asks Isabel to host his girlfriend. And the author, right away, establishes Eva as Isabel's total opposite. The conflict is just inevitable from the moment she walks in the door.
Isabel is all silence and control. Eva is described as a loud restlessness, a bee stuck in a room with all the windows shut.
A perfect description. She sleeps late. She wears heavy perfume. She leaves her things everywhere. She is pure chaos invading Isabel's desperate, fragile order. But we have to see that this chaos isn't random. Louis' trip gives Eva exactly what she wanted. Time alone in that house. And so Isabel, who was already terrified of losing the house and is now anxious about its history, she immediately translates all that fear into suspicion of Eva. It's so much easier to track a material threat, a thief, than it is to confront a historical one.
So she weaponizes her control. She starts the inventory list.
This isn't just some compulsive habit, is it? It's a frantic, desperate attempt to catalog the entire house, room by room, item by item. She's looking for proof. She needs a reason to throw Eva out.
And she finds things, or thinks she finds things. The paranoia is in the little details.
It is. The missing teaspoon, which brings the silver set down from 12 to 11. The silver candle holder that's been moved, which proves someone touched it. The engraved cake knife. She is cataloging the house not to cherish it, but to catch a thief. She's transferring all her deep anxiety about belonging onto Eva. Every misplaced object is another piece of evidence of Eva's corruption.
And this paranoia, it turns Isabel into a kind of domestic tyrant, especially with Nielke, the maid.
Isabel's cruelty to Nielke is just awful to read, but it's so important because it shows how fast Isabel's own morality is decaying. She accuses Nielke of stealing a spoon, a plate, the exact items from her own obsessive list. It shows how easily her anxiety turns into this abusive power trip. She needs a scapegoat, and Nielke is the most vulnerable person in the house.
But Eva, the intruder, she's the one who steps into that moral void.
She does. She immediately defends Nielke, which positions her as this morally sound outsider. Eva even helps Nielke peel potatoes, which is a social boundary Isabel would never, ever cross.
Which just isolates Isabel even more. Her rigidity and her tyranny are turning everyone against her.
So Eva is somehow both the chaotic villain and the moral voice in this first part of the book. It's a fascinating dynamic.
And before their own relationship turns intimate, the novel gives us this critical piece of context through Isabel's, well, her failed attempts at a normal life with her neighbor, Johann.
Those scenes are so important. They are tragic, really, because they explain why Isabel is so vulnerable to what happens later with Eva. They show us she is profoundly emotionally illiterate.
She finds Johann's touch, his hand on her knee, his kissing her neck. It makes her feel nauseous, dizzy. It makes her sick. She is physically repulsed by what is supposed to be normal intimacy.
But she's been conditioned her whole life to completely misinterpret her own body's signals. And it's because of this totally warped piece of advice her brother Hendrik gave her as a teenager.
What did he tell her?
He told her that intense physical revulsion, that nervousness, that feeling like you want to throw up. He said, that's how you know you like someone, when you're shaking and can't think, and maybe you're going to throw up if he comes any closer.
That's horrifying. So she's forced to believe that sickness and discomfort are actually signs of desire. Her whole internal map of emotion is just backward.
It's completely reversed, which sets the stage for disaster on her date with Johann. She tries to dress down to physically repel him, but he just misreads her nervousness and her physical discomfort as, playing games or being shy.
Her attempt at a normal connection just completely fails because she can't read herself and he can't read her.
And so she pushes him away decisively and retreats back to the house to what she thinks is safety, only to walk right into a confrontation with Eva. And all of that raw, confused trauma of misunderstood desire gets transferred directly into this new physical standoff.
The atmosphere is just instantly charged when she gets back from that date. Eve is waiting for her, and instead of being hostile, she starts challenging her about love, about intimacy.
Eva really takes charge here. She minimizes the physical act of a kiss, saying it's such a small thing you wouldn't believe. She's trying to lower Isabel's defenses, suggesting it doesn't carry any weight or consequence.
And then she does it. She just quickly texts Isabel on the lips.
A non-hostile boundary violation, as you said. And Isabel's reaction is immediate and visceral. It's painful. She feels branded. Lemon to a wound. Salt.
Wow.
It's this mix of purifying pain and a totally unexpected sensation. It's the small act of intimacy she couldn't stand from Johann. But from Eva, it kicks off the central conflict of the book. It confirms that for Isabel, desire is all tangled up with transgression, with losing control.
But that tension gets interrupted, right, by Hendrik and his partner Sebastian coming for a weekend visit.
It does. It forces the women to be guarded around each other. But it also ends up revealing Isabel's own family history of repressed desire. The house itself just forces these secrets to the surface.
Isabel remembers finding Hendrik with his piano tutor, Edwin.
Yeah, she remembers finding them entangled on the mossy ground when she was a teenager. And her immediate reaction, the one she was taught to have, was judgment. It was wrong. She saw it through her mother's rigid, unforgiving moral code.
But Hendrik, now that he's older, he forces her to see the truth of his experience.
He does. He just says it plainly. I wanted him. He's demanding that she acknowledge desire that exists outside of their mother's strict rules. And then he says the most important thing to her. You don't have to be her, Isabel.
He's telling her she doesn't have to be their judgmental mother.
He sees that she's trapped in that code, and he recognizes her repression. He is essentially giving her permission to feel, to desire, even if it's something that's forbidden.
And that's the psychological green light for what happens next at the inn.
Absolutely. They go to an inn during a storm, and all of Isabel's suppressed feelings just peak. Her rejection by Johann, her fear of Eva, her jealousy watching Eva dance so easily with Hendrik, it all comes to a head.
And they have to share a room.
The proximity in that small space is just too much. It culminates in this frantic, confused, physical encounter.
And there's that incredible detail about Isabel losing control of her voice. The book says she realizes she can't keep quiet, and she lets out these sounds she spent her whole life stifling into pillows. What does that loss of control symbolize?
I think it's the profound moment of both liberation and absolute terror for her. It's the sound of her true self escaping decades of emotional and physical imprisonment. Isabel has lived her life silencing herself to maintain the control her mother demanded to keep her precarious place in the house.
And the physical release just overrides all of that.
It does. It shows that her body, unlike her mind, can't keep the secrets anymore. It's a moment of just profound vulnerability, and the experience is marked by this mix of fear and deep, deep longing.
The book mentions that Eva whispers a curse, but then whispers it again at Isabel's cold hands on her waist.
That detail signifies the complex, almost violent nature of their connection. There's aggression and intimacy happening at the exact same time. And then Eva does this strange, intimate thing. She uses their mother's words to comfort Isabel. My darling, my darling.
That's a devastating moment of paradox. She's mixing maternal care with a sexual connection, giving Isabel the comfort she's been starving for her entire life. But is it genuine? Or is Eva just maneuvering, trying to possess Isabel psychologically?
I think it has to be both. Eva needs a home, she needs security, and Isabel is offering that even if she doesn't realize it. But Isabel's desire is still inseparable from aggression, from this urge to possess. And in this crucial moment, Isabel bites Eva's hand. Hard.
Knowing that this violent act is what she liked, how she liked it, that one action, the bite, it feels like it contains their whole relationship.
It absolutely does. It underscores the toxic, desperate nature of their bond. It's built on need, possession, and violence, not on tenderness. Isabel wants to possess Eva in the same absolute, brutal way she wants to possess the house. She wants Eva to carry a physical, permanent mark of that possession, just as the house carries the invisible mark of its true history.
And this fragile, violent intimacy they've built is just immediately shattered by reality. By Louis, he calls.
He calls to break up with Eva. He's found a new girl, Mary, and he asks Isabel to basically manage the cleanup. Louis, true to form, uses this familiar, self-absorbed language of abandonment and forces both women to confront the truth of their unstable situation.
Which forces Eva to finally reveal her real motivation.
Yes. She finally admits that her motive was pure stability and the house itself. She says, I have nothing, Isabel. I have not a thing in this life. In that moment, Eva is stripped bare, revealing just how precarious her life is.
But the ultimate pivot, the moment this domestic drama becomes a historical reckoning, is when Isabel finds Eva's notebook. She thinks it's a diary about her breakup with Louis.
But it is not a diary at all. It's an extensive, meticulous inventory list.
And this is the moment where you have to reevaluate the entire first half of the book, don't you?
Completely.
Yeah.
Isabel thought Eva was just a clumsy thief or some random girlfriend. Now she realizes Eva was documenting something else entirely. The list had these highly specific, personal items of the family who lived there before. The hair china, a menorah, and a little dog toy named Haji.
Little hair. So the dog toy's name Haji connects directly back to the china, the hairs. The symbolism now suggests that the very items Isabel was guarding weren't symbols of her family's stability, but of Eva's family's loss.
The author layers this so effectively. The list wasn't cataloging what Isabel was losing, but what Eva intended to get back. And the diary entries confirm it. She writes about hearing a story in November 1960 about a girl who pretended to be a maid to steal back her family's heirlooms.
And Eva thought,
I am going to do that. Her pursuit of Louis, her arrival at the house, it was all deliberate, premeditated, and based on a profound sense of historical injustice.
And then the true, brutal history of the house is finally revealed. The menorah confirms the previous family was Jewish. And the story of how the house was sold exposes the lie that Isabel's family built their entire life on.
Eva reveals that the house was sold not because of some legal maneuvering, but because her father died in the camps and couldn't pay the mortgage. This completely contradicts the family story that it was just standard procedure. The Denbray family, Isabel's family, moved into a house whose vacancy was a direct result of an atrocity. The house itself is a physical symbol of post-war moral debt.
We have to pause here because this moves the novel into a much broader context of coming to terms with the past in the Netherlands in 1961. The book implies that keeping property in these situations often relied on technicalities, on exploiting the fact that survivors or victims couldn't come back to settle debts.
That is the critical insight. The displacement of property in the Netherlands after World War II was filled with these legal and moral gray areas. Many properties were transferred legally, yes, but they were often acquired under duress or as a direct consequence of the Holocaust.
So for families like Isabel's, who weren't active collaborators but were definitely beneficiaries,
The line between legal ownership and moral theft was paper thin. Uncle Carol's insistence that they bought the house legally is like the entire nation grappling with its moral debt, trying to find clean legal language to cover up an atrocity. Eva's mission is a necessary moral reclamation where the law had failed.
which makes that final devastating memory so much more intense. The memory on the doorstep.
That entry from January 21st, 1961, is the true emotional climax of the book. Eva remembers being 16 in 1946, standing outside her own house. She and her mother were watching the Denbrays, Isabel's family, moving in. And her mother begged for her house back, banging on the window, shouting, "Call the police, let them come, call them."
My God. So Isabel was inside, safe behind those walls, while the rightful owners were outside, demanding a justice that the system was never going to give them. And the most terrifying connection is that Eva realizes that Isabel, the woman living in her house now, is the same awful girl she knew during the war. The one who dropped a plate of food and blamed Eva for it.
It connects the microaggressions of the war to the macro tragedy of the house. Eva writes, "Now when Isabel lives in my house, I'm sure this means something." The encounter wasn't a coincidence. It was destiny, a targeted act of historical confrontation. And this changes everything. Isabel is not the victim of a thief. She is the unwitting beneficiary of an atrocity. And now she's being forced to confront the history she moved into.
This new knowledge sends Isabel just spiraling. She goes straight to her family, to Uncle Carol, desperate for him to tell her it's not true.
And Carol, who is the architect of this whole legal fiction, he just maintains the cold, legalistic story. The house was bought legally. The original owners did not come back for it. He completely refuses to engage with the moral reality of what happened. He just dismisses Isabel's trauma, calling her Maisha little girl, asserting his authority.
But Isabel is fundamentally changed. She doesn't just retreat this time. She immediately shifts her demand. She says, "I want the house to be mine. Give it to me." She starts working to get legal ownership.
It's such a complex motivation. On one hand, she needs to own it to maintain control in the face of this guilt. But on the other, maybe she needs to own it so she can be the one to make amends. She knows the house's future has to include Eva, and this is the only way she can control that.
So her legal move is immediately followed by a moral one. She tracks Eva down in Amsterdam.
And finds her in this cramped, cold basement apartment. The contrast just physically shows you the cost of the displacement.
This is the real emotional confrontation of the novel.
It is. Isabel is stripped of all her arrogance. She just confesses her ignorance. "I didn't know a thing." And then she makes this final, desperate, very complicated offer. She tries to use her new legal claim as an act of reconciliation. She says, "I have arranged it. It will go to me. It's done. And you must live here, in your house."
But Eva sees the trap in that offer immediately.
She sees the possessiveness right away. She asks the most important question. "Do you mean to trick me? That to have the house, I must have you too?" Wow. She recognizes that Isabel's offer is just an exchange of one kind of prison for another. She refuses to be possessed again, even for her own ancestral home. And she tells Isabel to leave.
Eva's refusal forces Isabel into solitude, but it's a completely different kind of solitude from the beginning of the book.
Radically different. She enters this new state of being that's defined by duty, by labor, by repentance. She starts doing the actual work of the house herself, the physical work Nyoki used to do, the dusting, the cleaning, the cooking poorly. This difficult physical labor is her new act of devotion, and it replaces that passive, denial-based safekeeping. It's a kind of self-punishment, but also a true physical possession of the space.
And the meaning of the house shifts for her, doesn't it? From a personal safe haven to something more like a historical monument. And that's crystallized when she reads Isaiah 56.7.
She walks past the synagogue she always avoided, and she reads the inscription, "For my house will be called a house of devotion for all." And that redefines her entire purpose. It's not about her own security anymore or her mother's memory. It's about acknowledging that the house has to serve a purpose larger than herself. It's a repository of historical duty.
Which leads her to the final, painful act of true acceptance, cataloging the items of Eva's loss.
Yes. She sorts through the items from Eva's inventory list, the ones she's recovered. The menorah, the dog toy Hajj, the hair china, and she finally recognizes them not as her family's precious artifacts, but as the genuine artifacts of the family they displaced. That act of sorting and recognition is her first real step toward accepting the house's trauma and Eva's moral ownership. She's becoming a custodian of truth, not a warden of denial.
And the novel culminates months later. It's deep winter, cold January, and Eva returns to the house.
She arrives freezing, apologetic, walks from the station. God, this is a bad idea. But she immediately goes back to the unresolved trauma. She challenges Isabel one last time. She begged for her house back, and where were you? Eva needs Isabel to fully face that image of her family on the doorstep, in the cold, begging for justice.
And Isabel, after all these months of labor and reckoning, she finally makes this ultimate desperate plea. It's not a conditional offer of property anymore. It's an unconditional offer of herself.
She sinks to her knees. Isabel makes her final, rawest offer, framed by her own inability to leave. She says, I cannot leave. I have nowhere else, but you can have anything, all of it, or not if you don't want it, or me if you will. Will you have me? Will you have me?
It's a complete collapse of her old self, of her status. She's acknowledging the legal reality she will own the house, but she's offering Eva everything inside it, including herself, as a vessel for Eva's history and need. She's offering her own body as the safekeep.
And Eva accepts. She accepts the physical offering. She kisses Isabel, holds her close, and they find warmth in the brutal cold. The house remains legally Isabel's. That truth can't be undone by moral debt alone, but their relationship becomes this shared, complex wound and a painful path toward truth. The house, which was built on a lie and sustained by Isabel's rigidity, can only become a true house of devotion if its inhabitants accept its traumatic, shared history. And the relationship between Isabel and Eva is that difficult, necessary, painful path toward real human connection after so much isolation.
The Safekeep reminds us that sometimes the most haunting ghosts are the people we try to become or the people we try to replace. If this story unsettled you in all the right ways, share it with someone who loves literary shadows and subscribe to Stories Aloud for more beautifully haunting tales. Until next time, keep listening.